let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to Coming On Podcast. I got the brother El-Mekki coming from Philly. You know what I'm saying? He eating Philly cheesesteaks. He's saying John like it's nothing, you know. Meek Mill is all over his ringtones. I don't know if he still got a ringtone, but I know that Freeway verse, from like Identical, man. You know the Freeway song I'm talking about with Jay-Z and them, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yo,
How
listen,
we do?
man.
How we
yes,
do?
oh my gosh, yo. When I play that song, I'm like, am I really in the trenches or am I really from the suburbs, man? Because I feel it when he's singing that song, man. El-Mekki, 8 Black Hands, the brother, man, came through on the Calvin on the podcast. Thank you so much, brother El-Mekki. How you doing today?
Great, man. Good to be here. Good to see you. And glad we're able to connect and dive in. I think, you know, this is a really important topic and conversation to be had. And not just here. Hopefully this spawns, you know, continuous conversations throughout. And I think it's you know, we'll get into it, but I'm hoping this can also be one of the kind of workshops at the National Black Male Educators Convening, you know, later this year.
Absolutely. So brother El-Mekki, he's coming from the Center for Black Educators, and he's developing specifically Black male educators to go into the schools and be transformative, right? We want you to be change agents. We want you to come in here with the expert knowledge of your content, but then also you're an educator where you're coming in with the SEL focus. You're coming in with really trying to help the disparities. You're coming in with trying to come in and, you know what I'm saying, fix the equity issues that are there, right? And there's data that shows that if there are black male teachers, your kids' scores can increase dramatically. So let's just start there. Why do you think black male educators are so crucial when it comes to I won't say the survival of education, because I feel like education has already been surviving, but just one of the antidotes?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, particularly and it's good for all children, but particularly for Black children and very specifically for Black boys. You know, we know that having a Black educator, you know, and we've known this for a long time. Look, in the 1800s, Caroline LeCount was here in Philadelphia in the 1800s demanding more Black educators for Black children. Right? We know in 1967, again in Philadelphia, high school students walked out with some demands. You know, thousands of high school students walked out of school, marched on to the school board of education, and one of their demands was more Black teachers. And so this has been a long, just a long trek of people understanding like the role that Black educators, play. You know, matter of fact, Caroline LeCount's fiance was Octavius Catto, who was, an activist, but he was also an educator who was murdered for, you know, having the audacity to organize Black folks to get out and vote. So, you know, when we look at like the impact, you know, it's short term, not only test scores, grades, belongingness, less racist curricula, better communication between school and home, less disciplinary referrals. So not only suspension and expulsion decreasing, but even referring to disciplinary, office or whatever is, decreases. And so when you take all of that, but then when you also look at long term that Dr. Constance Lindsay and her colleagues did, and long term, they saw that Black boys with a single Black teacher could be up to 39% less likely to drop out of school, and up to 29% more likely to enroll in college. So we've known all of that. There's also another factor that plays into it. Not only is that person who's leading the classroom and having that impact on the students that they touch, but they also touch the ecosystem. What policies are there that they can push back on? What are colleagues who are saying that, how are they demonstrating, racial biases, in their policies and their grading practices and their disciplinary practices? They can stand as vanguards in this space. When we know the system itself is going to be a microcosm of society. Well, society is anti-Black. So the school is going to be a microcosm of that society, which means that it's inherently also going to be anti-Black, because there are people from the society who are coming in, often who are like, parachuting in and rocket shipping out to go back to their own neighborhoods where they might not necessarily see that connection. And I think it's also just really important to point out, like, mindsets matter most is what we say at the center. Mindsets matter most because we also know that, and this is something Dr. Carter G. Woodson raised long ago. Good friend, Dr. Elsie, she'll have her PhD after this dope dissertation she did.
Yeah.
What she points out is that Dr. Carter G. Woodson was pointing out, in the early 1900s, that even if it's a Black teacher, if they're raised under the same system, if they're trained under the same system, to not interrogate it, but to reinforce it, to just be a cog in the wheel, they'll do the same damage to Black kids. And I would also say, like, maybe it's even worse, because as a Black child, if I saw that from someone who looks like me, who shares some kind of background, cultural background, that could be even more problematic.
So thank you so much for giving us the history. That's one thing I really love about, you specifically, just the Eight Black Hand podcast. You all are very well read. And then one really good book that you all just definitely, I think you all literally did a podcast about it, or I did a podcast about it, was the Black Education in the South by Dr. Jesus Christ.
James Anderson,
yeah, from 1863 to 1935. And it literally just talks about how Black people started the public school system. You know what I'm saying? That
especially in the South,
that drive, that greatest acquisition of literacy was 6 years after slavery ended, right? And they already had those schools in order, right? So we've been doing the work, right? Indeed. But what do you feel like are the barriers, right? So I'll tell you a quick story. So I'm gonna let you know right now, like, I'm a transformative Black male educator, and I don't say that just because, you know what I'm saying, I believe it. I say it because I do it. I do the work, man. I've been doing it for 7 years.
And they're working, yes.
Yeah, and it's working, you know what I'm saying? And I can guarantee you, like, because of that, from the beginning, a lot more Black male educators have been coming into school. A lot of Black teachers, Black teachers, right? Black educators have come into the school, right? Definitely, it works. What you're saying, being that vanguard. I literally can think about those meetings where I was just, no, like just being that person to be that opposition. And then I can explain why I'm saying no, but being there is just as important.
Yeah.
We hired one Black male teacher one time, I remember, and he kind of had that competitive element towards me, meaning that he felt like he had to up me because he thought that he was in competition with me. So much to the point where he only lasted like 2 days because he didn't feel like he was ready. Yes. He didn't feel like he was ready for what a quote unquote Black male teacher was supposed to bring. So much to the point where he just quit. Right. And I just thought about that when you was thinking about that. So helping Black male teachers get into educators, what do you feel like are some of the barriers that is just keeping us in the classroom and also matriculating?
Keeping us, but the barriers to keeping us from joining the classroom.
Yeah. So why is it so low? Why is it only 2%? Why is it only 2%?
And less than 2%. At this point, I think there's several factors. I think one, we have to constantly recognize and interrogate, Black boys' experiences in schools. Our upbringing plays a role in how we act as an adult. Our experience as students is going to have an impact on how we perform as educators, right? Like, this is literally returning to a place that we may have pretty negative experiences. And even if we came back, it's rare that those type of issues are mitigated, addressed, even acknowledged. There are plenty of folks who are actually oblivious that, the Black boy's experience has connections to a Black man's experience, outlook, and their own biases within the school system. So, that's one. Dr. Chris Emden frequently, talks about, when he comes, he just reminds us that, for some Black boys that we're recruiting to become teachers, for them, it's like returning to the scene of a crime committed against themselves. And we know that there's plenty of crime against Black children within schools.
Okay, let's stop. Let's stop. Thank you for saying that. So now in teaching programs, though, right, we're being prepared to become teachers most of the time, right? We're not prepared to solve crimes. So, and not like in a literal sense, but you know what I mean, to solve the problems that you know what I'm saying, that are just been
But
there
if it was
for
a
years.
good program, it would be. But we have to recognize it as a crime. Black children, what is it? Julian Bond. I was about to say James Bond. Julian Bond talked about, it's violent for a black child to go through school for 12 years and get 6 years worth of education. So that means it is a crime. So if I'm an ed prep program, that's exactly how I'm orienting myself to say, like, yo, this is actually, you are crime fighters. You are freedom fighters, right? You're a freedom fighter because you're fighting against something, which means that it's generally a crime against humanity. That's why you need freedom fighters, because there's some crime against humanity that's happening, and you need people to come in and be vanguards in that space. And we can't be naive enough to think that that's only out in the streets and in other institutions, but not schools. Oh, that's in the courts, but not schools. It's in the police department, but not school. It's in the economics and the commerce, chambers of commerce and the state houses, but not schools. No, it starts in schools. In Dr. Jarvis Gibbons' book, he quotes Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who said there would be no lynching if it weren't for the schoolhouse. If it would be no lynching if it weren't for the schoolhouse. So he's positing that the position of a schoolhouse is critical to like how people think about themselves, but also how they think about others. And so if there's an ed prep program that's not coming in as if there's and they don't have to lead with this is crime, but they should be transparent about here are the conditions. And here's the racist institutions and the biases that people are armed with their policies, with their practices, and they're coming in to so-called teach black and brown children. No, it is a crime. And the problem is, as you point out, most of them are not preparing, folks to do that, and they're teachers say that. Teachers say, I came out, I graduated, I spent tens of thousands of dollars. I was there for 4 or 5 years.
I taught
in the hood, prepared to teach. And
I have no idea what to do if a kid just walks out of my class and says F you. I'm not to be like in a definite mindset. I'm not trying to like paint all black kids as a definite mindset. What I'm trying to say is like teacher prep programs aren't teaching you how to break up fights. They're not teaching you how to deal with the trauma after you experience the fight. They're not teaching you.
You're talking about the bad stuff. They're not teaching you how to teach kids how to read. Like
they're not teaching you how to teach kids how to read.
Yeah, okay. Forget the negativity. Let's start just at neutral.
But that's hard to forget the negativity, El-Mekki.
No, I'm just saying, but
that's
just
hard.
Listen, if they're not teaching you how to teach kids how to read, how are they going to get to any of the other stuff?
So what are they doing? What are they doing? Are they just giving out?
They collected some dough. That's what that's what a lot of them are doing.
Your job and what you're doing is admirable, it's respected, and the ancestors, including me, will, you know what I'm saying? We're proud of that. But it seems like the job that you're doing is tremendously hard. And just like, you know what I'm saying, everyone you quoted from the Carter G. Woodson, who wrote Miseducation of Black people, right? The Miseducation of the Negro with my mama gave me that book, 2 of those books when I was 11 years old with the person with the lock on the head. I read that book. You understand what I mean? Amos Wilson.
With the green background, right?
Exactly. I read all those books, right? But when does it come to the point where the only people that are going to save this system are the people of color, are the people that are, against it? It can't be to the point where, because it seems like, brother man, it seems like you are, and everyone else is with you, right? Because it's not just you, right? It just seems like the score, right? It seems like the score, right? It is against white supremacy, gun violence, right? You know what I'm saying? Bad teacher prep programs. It seems like if we're in a game right now, it seems like they're winning by 50, and we are like, we down by 20, and we it's still in the game, but it's a deficit. I don't know. What do you think? Be honest with me. Do you think the job that you have, what's what I'm trying to say, is hard? And knowing that it's hard, how do you motivate yourself to keep it moving and not get caught up in becoming part of the problem, like you said?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think anytime you're serving, from my perspective, God's creation is going to be hard. Those are challenges. I think anytime you're serving humanity, it's not, just making widgets. You're like interacting with human beings. is going to be challenging. I think for me, a couple things keep me grounded, motivated, inspired, hopeful. Things that steel my spine and focus my gaze is often, like one, history.
Yeah.
As hard as it is for me and my team right now, it ain't as hard as Dr. Carter G. Woodson had to fight.
Yeah.
It wasn't as hard as Mary McLeod Bethune.
Yeah.
When they were coming to burn their school down. Like now they try to burn it with a keystroke, but they were actually bringing torches.
Yeah.
Threatening to burn her school down in Florida. Lucy Craft Laney and Nanny Helen Burroughs and all these folks. And then this was part of my upbringing. Even when we said we were tired, they would name some ancestors like, and how tired were they? So some of that has just been ingrained, and I get the folks who are just like, hey, well, just because it happened doesn't mean it should be. Like, yes, I agree, and this is the reality. But I also chose to do this, and everybody, listen, I don't know what profession is not going to be hard if it's worthwhile doing and you're doing it with all your might. But for me, this is absolutely sacred work. It's political work. It's one of my favorite lines in Amir Suleiman, my favorite poet. He says sometimes you got to take off the iron vest and run into the thick of the mess. And for me, that symbolizes like, yeah, you can be safe, you can be fall back, be in the background. But somebody has to run into the thick of the mess. And some people have to remove some of their safety. Some of the folks have to be even more vulnerable and go where they're needed. And to me, that's a part of it. It's I'm sure a lot of your audience heard about the parable of the river, right? Those folks who are pulling, kids in the river and somebody's like right there pulling them out, right there in that space. But then there was a group of people that started to run upstream. And they're like, where are you going? Like, you're abandoning the work. And they're like, no, we're going to see who's throwing these babies in the water, not Amen. Just. And, so I think, for me as a child of activists and a community of activists, like, this is the work for me. And like, yeah, it's hard. Being a teacher was hard. Being a principal was hard. Being a leader in a small nonprofit, Black, led, Black founded nonprofit, that's hard. It's all hard. But, what gives me hope and inspiration are these students, the youth, like them taking on their leadership and understanding and their promise. And listen, I know I'm resigned to the fact that I'm not going to see all the things that motivate me. I'm not going to see that in fruition. And I am 100% fine with that. Just like the people who paved the roads for me to be able to run faster on, who left lighting for me to be able to see better. Yeah, they knew they weren't going to see the benefit, but they had confidence. They had absolute, undeniable confidence and faith that, this is for the next group. So I would even tell my students, like, yes, I'm working hard because I want you to be successful, but this is actually for your grandchildren. And you tell a middle schooler that and rock their world where they're like, what? Huh? Like, yeah, I want you to remember, like, yes, I'm pushing you. I'm pushing myself. We're building community. Yes, it's for you, but I also have a vision for your grandchildren. And to me, that is a part of the work. That's what fuels me. When I got into teaching, because I was on my way to fight police brutality. That's what I thought my whole work was going to be. Yeah. But Dr. Martin Ryder, Black man, veteran Black educator in Philly, talked about this idea that the purest form of it, he's like, I see all that activism, I see all that fire that you got and you all the changes you want to make. The purest form of activism is teaching Black children well. That right there has fueled me for 30 years. Yeah, bro.
I mean,
purest form of activism.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the Black Panthers did, right? The one of the reasons why they were taken out because they had those food breakfast programs. They were getting to the educators. Hitler was amazing because he was able to get to those kids and change their minds, right? Because he understood the power of education and the mind. And not saying that he's amazing, meaning like he was able to get so much power because he started attacking the education system. So
what do you think? What you meant.
So what do you think is the reasoning behind the attack on education today? where we have a lot of books being banned, where a lot of the language that you're speaking, where if you say, they're committing crimes, right? If you say black, you know what I'm saying? You get labeled as CRT, you get labeled as woke, you get labeled as, all these other just innuendos or phrases, all because a white man lost an election and he put this big lie and just put it out, and they try to put lies and everything and call this a lie, just so we can get confused, right? How do you deal with that, right? Because even that, teachers are losing their jobs, right? They're losing their comfort. They're losing just because they're trying to speak the truth, everything that you're talking about, that they're, obviously it's a reaction, right? Because they're being reactive to this paradigm shift that George Floyd's caused, right? During COVID. But like, even then, like, how has your job changed with those new dynamics?
Yeah, you know what? I think, again, this is we always have to connect the dots, right? Like, so even with this new iteration, it's not new. Iteration is new. But the idea of, over policing, again, if we over police Black men and Black people in the streets, that means we're going to over police them in schools. Again, this microcosm thing, right? And so, and Dr. Jarvis Gibbons, again, in Fugitive Pedagogy, he talks about Black teachers having to hide the curricula that they knew was good for kids.
Yeah.
Because when they were being observed, when they were being policed, they had to make sure that they were teaching what white folks wanted Black kids to teach, which was not much. But the students would share, oh yeah, my teacher, she would hide the book that we were actually learning from, some of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's books. And so some of them were teaching Dr. Carter G. Woodson material because they're like, oh, this curricula the district gave us is crap.
Boring.
It is not only boring, it is outright racist. And we're going to put that aside, but telling the students like, yo, when principal so-and-so come in or the superintendent come in, I'm switching off, play your part. Like, you know what I mean? Where there was this understanding, I used to, as a principal, I would tell my teachers that every lesson plan is a political document.
Yep.
And every time you teach is a political act. They understood the assignment. So today, when you got folks like Rufo who are saying they want to make CRT toxic to touch, and when you ask them what is CRT, they say, I don't know what it is, but it's everything I don't like. Everything that I don't feel comfortable with, we're going to, attach the CRT, sticker on it and say, hey, this is toxic. Don't, hazardous to touch. It's almost like put on your hazmat,
It's like the Fab Five when the Jalen Rose, they started wearing black socks. You know what I'm saying? They started wearing long shorts, Yeah.
Automatically it becomes this like, oh, you know what? That's the bad guy. Yeah, those are. So that, this was a tactic. It continues to be a tactic, but they have lineage. Just like we have a lineage, we have an intellectual genealogy. The haters, the racists, they also have, and they have a very pure lineage. Like you can trace that, John, like straight all the way through. But you know what? So can you trace the resistance. So can you trace the organizing. So can you trace the intellectual genealogy and the the pedagogical frameworks. We have a lineage too. And so it behooves us to remember that we have one and acknowledge like they got one too. Right. And so, I think, for us, we just have to know that this is not new. And as they shift and shape and morph, we have to do the same thing. Pull and draw from our history and then apply what we can to the now. Right. And so some of this with the CRT, some of it is like, we need folks to create lawsuits, against the folks who are doing this. Right. We need to make sure that we're continuing to raise our voices and organizing. We need to make sure that those that have a little a modicum of freedom and access, that they're using those spaces and spots carefully and making sure that we're giving cover for others who can't. We have to own out of school time. So if they're saying like, you can't do this within our buildings, we're like, so what? We got our churches, our masjids, our community centers, our porches, and we still going to teach what needs to be taught. Right. So there are a whole lot of things that we need to be
careful with that, El-Mekki, though, because I feel like even with that mindset, right, I feel like that can also be a little taxing sometimes, too. So I'm going to be honest with you, brother, man. OK. My mother was a teacher in the New Orleans Public School Board for 40 years. My mom was from the Lafitte Project. She's the first to go to college. She taught in New Orleans Public Schools for 30 years. She taught in Maryland for 10 years. New Orleans Public Schools. Like, I'm in education, brother, man. But I'm in my jada year right now. I'm paying for childcare now. I just had a kid. And that child care is whooping my ass. I am broke as a joke. You know what I'm saying? And all of my energy, all of my just fight. And it's not that it's dwindling, brother, man. It's just like I need a battery. You know what I'm saying? Because like I feel as a man, right, who I have to provide and do things for my family. All my energy, all my time, it goes into my schoolwork. It goes to my robotics class. It goes to my robotics team. It goes to me helping kids out. It goes to me, you know what I'm saying, doing that extra work outside of hours. Now, all the extra work out of hours is getting taken to my family now, right? And so now I'm thinking about taking care of my family, where the focus was freedom fighting. Always the focus is freedom fighting, but now it's getting murky because now I have to be a little bit more focused on myself. So just hearing that, right, and maybe thinking about other Black male educators who in different situations, they always say Black men men don't go into education because of the pay. You know, like teaching was a pink collar job because it was a job originally for women because women didn't get they didn't get the pay that they got, right? That's just the theory, but that's not a theory that it was a pink collar job, but the theory that why men don't want to, begin education because of the money. But how do you motivate that? Even those dynamics, right? Just hearing that, how would you motivate, or just how would you respond? Just be responsive to just hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple things, important issues that you raise. Back to Dr. Akila. One of the things that she noticed was that the effective educators also had like boundaries.
Yeah,
they had boundaries, time, emotions, and things like that. Like you can do the work, I believe, and still have boundaries to make sure that and everybody has to know themselves. Know thyself is the first part. Like, what is I don't believe in work-life balance because it kind of portrays that it's like a scale and everything's even. And if I work for 8-9 hours, then that means I have to, be chilling for 8-9 hours. I just don't think that's how life is. But, finding the pattern and rhythm that works, for people in their family, understanding what their battery is and making sure, our social worker that, she worked with students, but she worked just as much with the staff. She would always talk about just carving out time. And she said, for every individual, it's up to them to decide how much time they need for their battery. But she said, making sure that they carve out every day time that grounds and supports you in that space. So for some folks, it's a whole lot of time. They need I need to de-escalate. I need to do this. I need to do that. Others, it's less, right? Like some, it's less. And then they're like, all right, now I'm doing this. There are others like me and many others where there's no work and then life. It's life. Like it is like this is I'm not looking for I shut down. I don't open my computer. I don't read the books I read also reinforces my mindset about the work, right? Like that's just me. Like I'm not really, bro. I don't read that many novels. When I'm reading, it's probably an article, a biography, nonfiction, right? You know what I mean? Like it's that type of thing. But I might do it sitting and watching the fish. And you know what I mean? Like my father, my brother, my son, they helped me dig a little pond. Matter of fact, every house I live, we all have them. And some of them very small. It's like some of, you know what I mean? Like, but we all have little koi ponds. You know what I mean? Like, because for us, that was a thing. Gardening for me is a thing. You know what I mean? So I've probably planted over 100 trees, bushes, vines, you know what I mean? Just specimens.
Right.
Over 100, because for me, that's fulfilling. And that's like, as my social worker used to say, like find time to carve out to make sure that you're doing something that brings you joy. And for me, that's part of the help. I think the money thing, it's all, some of the folks that were saying that when I asked them what they were making, they were actually making less than a teacher, but saying like teachers don't make anything. I'm like, they make more than you. Like you're disparaging what they make.
They're not respecting the field. And they got benefits. Yeah.
Yeah. And so some of it is just misunderstanding, people parroting, right? Like, so once people hear something, it's easy to constantly repeat it because it's just like, well, how much should they make or how much? And I'm never going to stop advocating and around increasing educator salaries. I think educator salaries should raise and the effective ones should raise significantly.
Yeah.
So like that, we're part of the coalition that's supporting the Teacher Salary Project. Folks can look that up, teachersalaryproject.org, other spaces, just believe in that. I worked in a charter school for 11 years where, it was performance based, right? Like, and so, it was every year it was about, student achievement, like how were students performing, the observations that you made were made and like how you were performing on instructional standards, your values, and then student surveys. How did students say their experiences were in your classes? Those were the 4 components that funneled into, the raises that people made. And so we have folks that didn't have to wait for 30 years before they got to 90,000. We have folks who were there for, less than I forget like how much time, but they were like making it in the 90s and early in their career, because they were so effective across those 4 domains. Right. And so I think it's all of that, and you can't compare Mississippi to Massachusetts when you talk about pay. Right. And then the average and all those kind of things. So anyway, I think all of that is. And then, when we look at just the economics, I used to tell students, we work with high school students and they ask all the time, as they should. When we say like, listen, you know what, you're actually in front of, and doesn't mean it's the only time you're working, but you're actually in front of children, you're on about 180 something days.
Yeah.
Maybe 200 depending on the school, but between 180 and 200. And say like, how many days of the year? They're like, 365. Like, okay. So those other days, like, let's just say another 30 are for like training and developing your craft, and some of that may happen in the 180 days too, right? We're just saying like, suppose you're adding this, you're reading, you're researching, you're doing all these kind of things. Like, okay, now how much is left? All right, now how are you going to make sure that one, you're finding what your joy is, but then also you're Black in America.
Yeah.
You should always figure out like what's another revenue stream. And I didn't think like this as a teacher, like, most of the time. I would do things.
How can you capitalize off of that?
Yeah, I would tutor, I would do that, but I wasn't thinking about it in that kind of way. But that's how we talk to our students. Like, hey, you have to also be an entrepreneur mindset, no matter what field you're in. You should be thinking about like, hey, here's a hobby I have, and this brings me joy. Here's a skill or a hobby that I have that actually people need it and they'll pay me for it.
Yeah,
they need it. And look, my friend right now, he works in the criminal justice field. He's my college roommate. He's been cutting hair as a barber since we were in college. That was his side hustle.
Wow.
Now he's in a shop, you know what I mean, where he does that as his side hustle because he loves doing it. He loves making people look fly. He loves doing that. And so he adds that to his repertoire. Some people may be tutoring. Some people may be writing books. Some people may be leading PDs. Some people may be coaching. Like there are other things, but again, it's like, teachers don't make money. I'm always asking 3 or 4 more questions. Which teachers? Where do they teach?
Right.
What are they doing? What's the benefit? And, what are the benefits packages for that, group of educators, and compare that to the other folks. Because there's some folks who pay nothing for their benefits, right? Like they're in that type of education system where others, they're like, that's getting docked, right? So all of that, it's just part of the conversation, and salaries need to be raised, right? Like I want to say that unequivocally as well.
So Brother El-Mekki coming on the Calvin Ellen podcast, I really appreciate you really just showing that, like, and this is something that I try to prove as an educator. And one thing my mom proved to me, that you can live off an education salary. My mom raised me as a single mom, as an educator. She retired as an educator. So I remember those things. So thank you so much for just leveling the playing field for that. And just,
let me just add one other thing.
So
one of the ways that we push on this, not only are we saying increase the salaries, but what we're also saying is make sure that they have less debt coming out of college. So for me, that's more spending power if you have less debt, right? And so like part of the work that we do is the Black Teacher Pipeline Fellowship, where high school students who come through our program, they're interested in teaching. they go to college and they're majoring in something that can be taught, that can be, they can get their certification in, then they apply to be a Black Teacher Pipeline Fellow. So we created a Future Black Teachers of Excellence Fund. So Future Black Teachers of Excellence Fund, we raised $1 million to support about 30 students to go through. So about every million is about 30 students that can come through that, because it's last dollar scholarships. And then
love it.
And once they get to their 5th year teaching, it's a retention bonus, right? And this is for the city, students that came through our program and cities that we partner with, right? Or districts, LEAs, that we partner with. So that's like decreasing their debt, but also advocating for higher salaries and making sure they have a retention bonus. And I'm not talking about like $1,000. Like each of these is an investment of $40K per kid.
The equity is coming, man. And it's because of your work. It's because of a lot of other people's work. Even like Teach for America, they're becoming more progressive, which is the fellowship I'm in. The fellowship that got me into teaching, the Kellogg Fellowship, it was called the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. You ever heard of that? Yeah.
Yeah,
but they changed the name.
We have it. I didn't even know they changed it to Kellogg, because Woodrow Wilson was...
it's not Kellogg anymore, but they changed it to something else. The Kellogg is the foundation, but Woodrow Wilson was called... Right, but they changed it because, he got racist background. But even that fellowship, I would say, was an amazing teacher prep program. I was a physics major. I got my physics degree, and this was for career changers. So literally everyone that was in my cohort, they were career changers. They had science backgrounds, right? And it was a customized curriculum. We got taught by a master teacher that was a product of Detroit. She was a teacher in Detroit, and she worked for Detroit. We got all our basic courses. They got all the regular courses we didn't need, right? We got our masters. We had to write a thesis, right? We had to work. Our student teaching wasn't just 6 months or 4 months. It was a year.
As it should always be, more residency model. Yep.
You dig? And I can guarantee you, Wayne State University had one of the best prep programs out of Michigan State and University of Michigan, and I was a part of that. And I can guarantee you, if it wasn't for that program, they asked me to do it for 5 years, I wouldn't have been on my 7th year right now, right?
Yep.
Everyone don't have that program, El-Mekki, right? So
100%.
What is the ideal teacher prep program? Let's start with middle school all the way till you get your butt in the classroom, because I want to start with the kids. So let's go ahead. What's the ideal teacher prep program?
Yeah, I would say in that K-12 state, that middle high school is literally looked at as a career pathway. We have to start looking at teaching as a career pathway. If I'm in the 8th grade and I want to get into arts, science, literature, we used to have a school for architecture. Like as an 8th grader, I know where I'm applying to. Like even sports. If I'm an 8th grader and I want to like major in sports, I know which school to go to.
Why should teaching be a career pathway, real briefly?
Because it's a career. It's part of the labor workforce, and not just for that school. And this is the problem that people have. Like they want to disconnect things, and I'm like, everything is connected. Your city, your state, your region can't thrive without dope teachers. It just can't. You're not going to be able to hold, a population. People are going to leave, everything bad that can happen can be part of, like, we don't have, the dopest teachers, and we don't have, and it's disconnected. It's like, like in Philly, the city's budget and the school budgets aren't the same, aren't connected. It's like two different things. Nah, that school budget should be part of the city's budget. The city needs to recognize the schools are yours. They are part of you. Right. And so then you make sure that all the services are connected. How are the bus services connected to the schools and the population? How is the support and the safety connected to the schools and the population? Right. Like all of that should be integrated, which means it should be part of the city ecosystem and understanding. And there should be some synergy and connection and communication. Right. Like and we see like the lack of communication and the lack of coherence. Not only within schools, but we see it within school support. Any mayor, and Chris Stewart talks about this a lot. Like any elected official that doesn't look at themselves as part of the educational leadership of their space, they should be voted out. Like, I mean, they should be impeached, really, talking about crimes. That's impeach worthy, impeachment worthy as far as I'm concerned.
Third season of The Wire. Do you remember that season? The school system of The Wire?
I saw a couple, yeah.
I mean, literally, the mayor, he recognized that the Baltimore school system was an $11 million deficit, and he literally just treated it like a budget line, and it was just another budget line that he didn't control. And he just, you know what I'm saying? Left to the next person to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's too much punning and people not wanting to take responsibility and accountability. But it is a collective, and we have to look at our children as.
Yeah, sorry.
No. We have to look at our children as part of, all of our work, all of our responsibility. We have responsibility to them. And we have to integrate supports and services in just smart, logical, but also innovative ways, to make sure that we're meeting the needs that are, that exist. But
so after the career pathway, they get into high school.
High school. So again, career pathway. So, for us, it's teacher academies in high school where students are taking courses. Our goal is, if you're a high school student and you're interested in teaching, we want to design the supports where you graduate high school with an associate's degree in education.
Love that.
And a paraprofessional certificate. Like for us, that's how you, and again, part of, because all at the same time, we have to make sure, as we initially started talking about, their experience as students also has to be radically changed. It has to be anti-racist and anti-bias systems for them to experience as students, at the same time giving them early exposure. Now, we match that early exposure, that coursework, the dual enrollment, the CTE credits. We match that with clinical experience, paid clinical experiences. So these high school students, they can work. We're like, hey, if you're interested in teaching, you're interested in community, you're interested in being exploring what it means to be a vanguard and leading with equity and justice in mind. Don't go to McDonald's, come teach.
Right.
And so their paid clinical experience is a job where they learn how to teach in out of school time, after school and in the summer. And these high school students, college students are teaching literally first, second, and third graders after school and in the summer as a job. And they're supported, mentored, and coached by our team. Right. And so for us, it's that early exposure, clinical experience. If you graduate with this associate's degree, right, you're already, back to finances, saving money for college. Right. And then you apply for this Black Teacher Pipeline Fellowship, right? Through the United.
And then they just follow you up until you graduate.
And then we encourage them, join a residency. Even with all that, join a residency. Be with a master teacher for a year. Yeah. Not the second semester of your senior year. Talking about finances, student teachers should be paid as well. So we can talk about that another time, but that's again part of finances. But listen, bro. There were people, when we had to pay the apprenticeship for high school students, and college students, they were saying, oh, y'all should just get them to volunteer. And I was like, we're not doing that, because our future teachers, it's too hard. And we want to make sure it's connected to the social, political, and economic realities that we live in.
Yeah, man.
And we're already talking about the black and white wealth gap, and you want our students to just
work for free,
to volunteer. No, we're not. We're going to honor and encourage and support. And we're going to raise money so that they are on payroll and that they approach it as a job and as a responsibility. And that's how you start developing them in a different way. No, not volunteer where their time is then just, taken for granted and you have a job. And if they want to volunteer time doing something else for their passions, that's fine. But this is going to be a paid apprenticeship, not a volunteer apprenticeship.
Are you teaching them how to grade and lesson plan?
They do lesson plans, less on the grading, more on the lesson plans and assessment. We focus on how are you assessing student learning? How are you checking for student understanding? Less on grading.
Please teach them how to grade. Please just teach them that you don't need to grade everything.
That part. But that's back to assessment. Yeah. So that's what I mean. With the assessment.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because they're teaching first, second, and third graders. So they do pre and post tests.
Good.
They're checking to see how students are progressing.
Yeah.
They meet. So they teach in the morning and in the afternoons in the summertime. they're working with our coaches and mentors and supporters. We hope to have some Milwaukee, and we're in Detroit.
Yo, come through, man. Come through.
We're already there, bro. Like, yeah, we're already there. We'll be at. I'm hoping we'll be at 3 sites.
Okay.
Well, that's what Dana King. Sister Dana Davison. Yeah, yes, she's the regional director.
So could you again connect with me again
I sure will.
With her before the end of the podcast? This is my last question. So
she's recruiting and everything now. So yeah.
Okay, perfect. So my last question is really just what you already said so far. Why should anybody get into the education field, as we're talking about specifically, and why should Black males get into the education field?
Yeah, listen, Black men are already adjacent to schools and classrooms in some pretty significant ways. They are coaches, they are mentors, they are behavior specialists who are following around 1 or 2 kids, and so they're doing a lot of things adjacent to schools and classrooms. And what we're saying is we're inviting them to come in and actually lead those classrooms. Not be adjacent to, but actually lead the classrooms.
I get what you're saying by adjacent. I get what you mean.
Yeah. And so for us, like, that's a big part of it. Another part is, we're saying, like, hey, we need more Vanguards. You know what? These elementary school students, they're going to be the students later who, if they, did not have a good experience, we're going to see them and we're going to have to interact with them. You can't, if you're committed to community, this is another part. And remember, there are many ways to get into the racial justice, freedom fighting, human rights activism movements. But there is no pure form of activism than teaching Black children well and ensuring that they're being taught well. It's the classroom that shows the connection between educational justice and racial justice. And by leading a classroom. And
the lesson plan is what you said?
Every lesson plan is a political document, and every time you teach is a political act. There are few things that you will have the impact that you have as a leader of a classroom. And what we're hoping is eventually not only leaders of classrooms, but leaders of grade teams, content teams, schools, and districts. But you have to start by leading a classroom. For us, this is sacred work, and we invite, even the ones who had negative experiences, consider becoming a teacher you wish you had and you need it. Because somebody needs it right now. Somebody needs that right now.
Shout out to Mr. Carter. Shout out to Mr. James. Shout out to Coach Tony. Shout out to Coach Kevin. All the Black males I had in my life that literally got to where I'm at right now. I would not be here if it wasn't for you all. Thank you so much. I love you. Thank you so much, Brother El-Mekki, coming through from the Center of Black Educator from Philly.
Listen, I'll be in Detroit in June, man. I'm looking forward to meeting up.
I'm going to give you my number, man, and I can get you in person on the podcast, and we can meet up, chop it up, and let's build, man. Thank you so much. One thing I really got from this podcast is that, like, you got to know your history. Read your history so you can recognize that what we're going through has already been done. Meaning that there's been solutions to these problems. You just got to read it. Meaning that you might need to go back to, Dr. Ben, you know what I'm saying? You might need to talk to Ivy Van Sertima. You might need to, read some books, get your history on.
Because they sure came before Columbus. You better know. You better recognize.
Exactly, right. Exactly. But if not, definitely get that James Anderson, Black Education in the South from 1863 to 1935. Oh, my God. That book is amazing.
That should be part of the, Black educational canon, the Education of Blacks in the South of James Anderson.
It's so good.
Fugitive Pedagogy. All of Vanessa Siddle Walker's work, Horace Tate. Michelle Foster's work.
Yeah, man.
I'm reading Jarvis Given's second book. I don't know if you can see this.
Here, just back it up a little bit.
There
you go.
Oh, there it is.
Cool.
School Clothes. By Jarvis Givens. That's what I'm reading now. It's a fantastic follow-up to Fugitive Pedagogy. But yeah, there's so much important work, and we have it. Chris Stewart always talk about recapturing the Black educational capital. Recapturing that and making sure it's organized, it's accessible, not behind those JSTOR. You got to pay $50 to access it. Like, no, like, you know, we need access to, you know, what we've been doing, these Black pedagogical frameworks.
Yeah.
You know, I just did a TED talk, man, and I wanted to name it the Black teaching traditions. Shout out to Dr. Koso Lassane, who coined that for us. Black teaching traditions will save America.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
But we have the Black teaching traditions, but that means we also need a lot of Black folks to implement and also build on and innovate from these Black teaching traditions to carry us forward, man. So it's been a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build community with you.
Yeah, brother, man. Thank you so much for blessing me, man. Another thing I got from the podcast is just like, even when it gets hard, having a deficit mindset doesn't help. You got to count your blessings. That's one thing I've been doing every morning. Just really counting my blessings, just recognizing like I am blessed and I'm doing a lot of great work. You know what I'm saying? And I have a lot of power that I can use to, you know, continue doing what I'm doing. Right. You know, and like I've